So, I haven't done one of these video rebuttals in a very long time, but I kept getting sent a link to a guy talking about how the human eye can't perceive 4K. Ironically, this video comes from a channel called Knowing Better, and by the time this video is over, you may be asking him for an excuse on that one. Let's just jump into it and see what this guy has to say.
The next big thing when it comes to home entertainment is the 4K TV. And they're stupid. Now, if you didn't figure this out from my self-driving car video, I'm taking a holy grail of Reddit and deconstructing it in order to talk about vision. And maybe flirt a little bit with color, finally? 4K TVs will happen eventually.
No, 4K is already here. Been here since 2013.
Now this is currently being filmed in 1080p at 30 frames a second. Actually 29.97 frames per second, but 30, okay? And this is pretty much the current standard format for most media, including YouTube.
So I'm gonna skip forward here, as for the next 4 minutes all he really talks about is different resolutions and frame rates and how they work.
So here we are in the current mainstream format. Why did I just talk you through the history and evolution of video formats? Because we're already talking about upgrading to the next formats, again spearheaded by the video game consoles, the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. Before we get into the resolution changes, let's talk about frame rate. As I said, this video is being filmed and shown to you in 30 frames per second or FPS, but there's been a recent shift to 60 frames a second. Yeah, I know, we round up, I don't know why. Frame rate is kind of a sacred cow in the gaming community and on Reddit, and they'll defend it stronger than the Second Amendment people, so I have to tread lightly. Let me start this off by saying that the average person watching my video, whether you're a subscriber or you found this on Reddit, is not the average consumer. You're probably an early adopter, the techno elite, not the average consumer. Remember when you thought 3D TV, Google Glass, and VR were gonna be a thing? Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Well, see, the problem is one of your examples is still a thing. Sure, 3D TVs and Google Glass didn't go anywhere, but VR is more popular each year. In fact, from 2017 to 2018, VR gaming headsets have doubled in sales, whilst the 4K market, on the other hand, is growing like wildfire. According to Grandview Research, the 4K TV market size worth is around $390.9 billion, with a growth rate of 21.2. Seems this 4K scam's taken a lot of lives already.
Now, the human eye doesn't really see in frames, you see pretty much continuously. But beyond a certain speed, things can move too fast for you to notice. Now, depending on your source, at rest, that seems to be about 45 to 72 frames per second. Let's go with 72. That means just sitting there on your couch eating Doritos, if something appears on screen for 1/72nd of a second, odds are you'll miss it. Unless you know where to look and you're waiting for it. That's at rest though. Your perceived frame rate changes with your arousal level. If you just went for a run or are being chased by a dinosaur, or more likely you're hopped up on caffeine, you can see up to 120 frames per second. And if you're a superhuman or a fighter pilot, or you're on cocaine or something, you might be able to see up to 240, but no one has been able to reliably do it beyond that.
So, I don't know why we're talking about frame rate in a video about 4K, but okay. I could go into this with real world blah-de-blah, talking about how my Razer phone's 120Hz screen versus my 144Hz monitors, blah-de-blah-blah, but how about some real world observational science instead? So I set up my computer and launched GTA 5 and had my brother switch the frame rates on me. Once he was done, I sat down and played for a little bit, and not only was I able to tell the difference, but I was right every single time. So no, our cap at peak arousal is not 120 FPS, that's just nonsense. Also, the reason we round up when it comes to frame rate is because it's easier to say 60 than it is to say 59.94, but we use those numbers because they're part of a time code. Hours divisible by minutes, minutes divisible by seconds, and seconds divisible by frames. I could tell you more, but I'll just leave a link in the description, as this video is supposed to be about resolutions, not frame rates.
For a while after HD came out, they started to push different frame rates. When we're talking about screens, that's hertz. But hertz is frame rate. First it was 60, then 120, and then 240. But then they stopped because the average consumer was complaining.
Wait, what? A second ago you said the average consumer couldn't even see past 120 FPS unless on cocaine, and now the average consumers are complaining about 240 Hz? Tell me more.
Why would that be if we don't really see in frames per second? Because of the soap opera effect. The soap opera effect is when things look too crisp and too fluid for real life, giving it an eerie look and causing motion sickness. Move your hand in front of your face. There was a significant motion blur, wasn't there? Now, this camera isn't set to film above 30 frames a second, so let me, there we are. Okay, here's my hand over here, and now I'm moving it over here. You probably didn't notice anything weird, but here it is again side by side with 30 frames a second. Notice how there is no motion blur? So the soap opera effect makes things look like they're moving in slow motion, but at regular speed. I know, it's weird, which is why it gives people motion sickness.
Alright, small problem. If you render your video at 30 FPS, then yeah, we're not going to see a difference in this scene. Also, sports of all kind are shot at 60 FPS. Ever hear of any sports fans claiming motion sickness? It's funny, the higher the frame rate for me, the less motion sick I get, which might mean a little more coming from a guy who actively suffers from motion sickness. Not that I have the authority on this, I'm simply trying to show you that everyone's different, and your limits are not my limits. Also, I looked up your 240 Hz causing motion sickness thing, and Google gave me nothing, so I went back and checked your sources, and nothing. Not sure where that came from. Let's just continue.
The soap opera effect doesn't really affect video games because A, it's not real life, so nothing really looks all that strange, and B, they program in motion blur,
which I turn off every single time I launch a new video game.
So manufacturers have kind of stopped with the 240 and they're sticking to the 120 and 60, with 60 likely being the new standard. However, your frame rate isn't uniform across your entire field of vision, which I'll get to in a moment. The next big shift is to 4K or Ultra HD.
Ah, sweet! Took us 9 minutes, but we're finally talking about 4K. Normally I don't narc on people for how long it takes to get to the point, but that's half your video, buddy.
The next big shift is to 4K or Ultra HD, which is a stupid name, by the way. It's just something they came up with in a marketing meeting in order to make it sound more epic. Remember the naming conventions from before? 480, 720, 1080? There's a nice pattern going on there. But 4K is 4 times the size of 1080p, so you would think it would be called 4X. But it's only twice the width and height. So if we go by the same naming rules, it's 2160p. So where does 4K come from? It's the horizontal measurement, 3840, rounded up to 4K. If we use that same naming convention, 1080p is actually 2K. I told you it's dumb.
Really, it's not that dumb. 4K isn't one resolution, it's a category. 2K fits multiple resolutions, from 1080 by 1200 to 2560 by 2048, just the same way 4K fits multiple resolutions. You can be specific depending on which exact resolution you're talking about.
Anyway, HD was a huge jump from regular D. Most people could tell the difference, but HD to 4K, most people can't. Again, you're not the average consumer. And remember, you're usually sitting about 10 feet away from your TV, or at least you should be.
Okay, if I had a 15-inch 480p screen and I upgraded to a 15-inch 720p screen and sat 10 feet away, then yeah, I probably wouldn't be too impressed by the difference. That's why our TV screens get bigger as our resolutions scale up. Telling people to sit about 10 feet away from their TV or monitor is just dumb. There's a sweet spot for every TV, depending on the size and resolution, and if you don't take advantage of that sweet spot, then of course you're not going to tell the difference. That'd be like saying let's get a really nice sound system, but we'll leave it outside pointing at the house instead of in the living room where it'd be best utilized. Also, if you're telling me that most people can't tell the difference between 4K and 1080p, but then you also say there's not a lot of media for 4K right now, then no duh people don't know the difference. Upscaled 1080p is just not going to look like 4K, but show anyone true 4K and they'll notice that difference instantly.
4K is 3840 by 2160, which means that there are 8,294,400 pixels, or just 8.3 megapixels for short. For a 60-inch TV, that means each individual pixel is 1/3 of a millimeter wide. Put a dot on a piece of paper only 1/3 of a millimeter wide and then put it 10 feet away. Okay, you'll probably still see it because it's a black dot on a white piece of paper, but okay, you know what I'm getting at. But you know what? There's been a single black pixel right here for the last few seconds. Go back and watch it again. You probably didn't notice. And this is 1080p. Do you really think you would have seen it if it was 1/4 the size?
Okay, but telling people if they didn't notice that one black dot somewhere on the screen means they can't perceive 4K would be like me showing you a 30 FPS video, removing one frame and telling you if you didn't catch it, you can't see 30 FPS. That pixel has nothing to do with how sharp the image is, it has nothing to do with how crisp and condensed the image looks. Just because I can't distinguish one pixel out of 8 million pixels? In fact, I'll do you one better. Take that pixel and try to hide it in its 720p screen, now a 40p screen. What you'll find is the dot is much easier to see. The very fact that there is a difference to us, a difference in pixel density and clarity, it proves that higher resolutions do actually make a difference and we can perceive that. See, resolution isn't about pixels, it's about distinguishing fine details, and that relies on a lot of other factors like light, the size of the sensors, what the pixels are encoding, and how close the image is. Imagine if I took this video here and blurred it. The resolution's still the same, isn't it? So thinking resolutions are nothing more than pixels will just lead you to the wrong conclusion.
Now get this, there are 8.3 million pixels on that TV, and there are only 6 million cones in your eye. But that isn't the whole story because each pixel is actually 3 pixels in one, red, green, and blue. I hope you know that those are the primary colors of light. But we only think that because we're human. If you were to ask an alien what the 3 primary colors are, they might say, 3? Silly human, there are 15. Though that's pretty unlikely because wait, this isn't the color episode, stop. Anyway, the cones in your eye are only red, green, or blue. And while the ratio isn't exactly a third, if we match them up to make a pixel, that means that there are only 2 million pixels in your eye. Before you say anything, rods don't matter. If cones are the pixels in your eye, then rods are like the backlight. You can't really see with only rods, which... Stop trying to get me sidetracked. Anyway, cones aren't evenly spread across your retina. They're concentrated in an area called the fovea, which is only 1/3 of a millimeter wide in the center of your retina.
Alright, you want to do science? Let's do some science. Pixel density is the term you seem to be missing here. Yes, we can shove higher resolutions into any device we want to, but there's a point that becomes less efficient to do so. For example, let's say my phone has a pixel density, or PPI if you go by inches, of 513. What that means is as a normal user, I should be able to use my phone without noticing the individual pixels. But if I bring my phone closer to my face, then I should be able to start spotting those pixels. TVs, monitors, tablets, and phones all have a varied pixel density depending on the screen, the resolution, the panel, the contrast, the color accuracy, pixel response time all play a factor in this. Take what you then said about our eyes. If the fovea has 2 million cones, or pixels as you called them, the important part is not how many there are, but the density. And with them being crammed into a space only 1/3 of a millimeter wide, that means we humans have a pretty large pixel density, for lack of a better term. See, but again, this also has its factors, but that goes into biology and the science behind the human eye that we really don't need to get into much as our eyes don't see in pixels nor frame rate, so let's just move forward.
It's the most important part of your vision, and it's really the only part that gets tested when we figure out if you have 20/20 vision.
So he starts doing these party tricks for your eyes, which I don't mind. This is actually the part of the video that's the most accurate, so let's move further along.
Again, 4K will happen, mostly because they're just going to stop making regular HD TVs, but not anytime soon. There's virtually no content for 4K right now. Anything before last year will never be in true 4K because it wasn't filmed in 4K.
Well, right, but that's exactly why the logic falls apart. You don't get to say, well, most people can't see the difference when you've also said most people are still buying DVDs, haven't seen that resolution, and there's not a lot of 4K content. If they haven't seen that resolution before, then they're not going to know the difference. I'll bet you if sports shows and reality TV started being shot at 4K, and we could stream it reliably, then of course you get people upgrading. Sure, maybe I'm not the average consumer as I'm a PC gamer who does utilize 4K resolutions, but you don't get to tell me that because the general population doesn't know what 4K is, then that means nobody can see it.
The current generation of Blu-ray disc, the triple layer, holds 125 gigabytes of data. Do you know how big a 90-minute 4K video is? 477 gigabytes. So okay, it probably won't be on any physical media anytime soon.
I don't think I need to talk about compression here, do I?
So streaming, obviously.
Well, no, not streaming. You don't ask for the highest quality sound and then say, well, Bluetooth. I don't know why you have such an issue with compression. That's simply what gets it done.
Yeah, well, unless you live in a big city and not somewhere rural or like Australia, you better get used to this happening a lot. The major hurdle for 4K right now is the file size. It's just too large.
I'm not trying to be redundant here, but compression. Compression is the answer. That's it.
And there are virtually no games in 4K right now because of the processing power that would take.
Did this guy just say there are no games in 4K? Alright, I'm gonna freak out.
As of May 2017, only 0.82% of Steam players played in 4K. And Steam players are the PC gaming elite, so yeah.
Okay, not everybody takes the Steam survey. Most PC gamers care more about frame rates than they do resolutions. Take me for example. I have a 4K monitor and a 1440p 144Hz monitor. Guess which one I game on more? That means even I don't use my 4K monitor for gaming. However, when it comes to what resolutions are hip in the industry right now, most game devs design textures far above any resolutions we have access to, so that when new resolutions do come out, the game can be future-proof. On a different but related note, 4K TVs are constantly upgrading, and soon we'll have 4K monitors that also support gaming with those higher refresh rates. Saying most PC gamers don't use 4K, that means you can't see it, would be like me saying most people who drive never go above 120 miles per hour, therefore we can't perceive that speed. Really, when it comes down to it, we just don't care about 4K as much as we care about frame rate. Same way I don't really care much for 120 miles per hour as much as I prefer getting to work safely and on time. It doesn't mean it's not attainable, and it also doesn't mean some people do.
And in terms of TVs, in 2016, only 25% of all new TV sales were 4K. If I were a betting man, which I am, I would say that it's going to take another 5 to 10 years for 4K to catch on for the mainstream. Like cars, most people don't buy a new TV until their current one breaks. 8K on the other hand will never happen. It's just too much for too little payoff. If we look at video formats like soap, 480p and DVD is like regular old soap.
At this point, the guy starts comparing resolutions to soap. I cannot believe over 1 million people watched this video.
4K is mega antibacterial, kills 99.99% of everything soap.
I guarantee it.
There's an upper limit to what is necessary, and 8K has 16 times the pixel density of HD. That's too much. That's 5 times as many pixels as cones in your eye. You're never gonna get a TV with pixels the size of atoms, and at a certain point, it's just not an economical use of energy, storage, or bandwidth. And if you don't have better than 20/20 vision, it's pretty much lost on you. Most people don't see or care about the difference.
Yeah, and every time I talk to one of those people you refer to and we mention 4K, their eyes light up as though it's some dream for them to be able to own someday. Strange that, wouldn't you say?
Last week, I posted a poll on Twitter, shameless plug to follow me on there, asking people if they were to buy a movie today, which format would they prefer? Not which one could they afford, not which setup do they have, which would they prefer? And here are the results. Again, my average subscriber is not the average consumer, so if anything, these results are skewed in 4K's favor.
15 votes? So I posted the same poll to see what would happen, and I was quite surprised with the results. Of the people who voted, 40% voted for 4K, 53% voted 1080p, and 7% voted 480. When you look at the comments to this poll though, that's when things get real interesting, with a surprising amount of people saying the only reason they didn't pick 4K was simply because they didn't own a 4K TV. Now, was the data presented in either of these polls flawless? No, my subscribers may have a bias towards 4K, and the guy in this video says the same. But if we're going to make polls like this, can we at least give them the benefit of the doubt here? To me, it looks like 4K has a place in this industry, and there's a reason people want it.
Think of all the people out there who don't use Reddit or YouTube or Twitter. These are the people who still buy the Blu-ray DVD combo pack for the DVD. So now I hope you understand a little bit more about not just TVs and video formats, but how your eyes work and how your brain cleans up the information it gets.
Alright, you know what? I think it's time for a monitor upgrade. Let's go to bestbuy.com and see what we can find. 4K TVs, 194 options, that's pretty nice. Okay, let's take a look at 1080p. Oh, only 47, huh? Weird, it seems a lot more people are walking into stores, seeing how much better 4K is and instilling demand for it over 1080p. I'm seeing the same trend on Walmart.com, Amazon, Newegg. I don't know, it sure seems enough people can tell the difference. Either that, or we're being shammed and tricked into thinking there's a difference. Let me tell you guys a story. I had a friend over once. I was gaming on my 1440p screen and he made a comment about wanting to upgrade his monitors. I asked him to what and he said 1440p. He said I thought about 4K, but I don't think there's a large enough difference in quality to justify buying one. So I paused my game, switched it over to the other monitor, adjusted the resolution to 4K, and you know what he said? Oh, well damn it, now I need 4K. People can tell, it's just a fact. I don't know what you have against 4K. If you had said that there's not enough 4K content for people and that makes the resolution unjustifiable, then fine. Maybe you can argue that. Had you talked about pixel density and why scaling up would be inefficient, then fine. The problem that I had was telling people that they could not perceive 4K. And not only did you present a lot of misinformation, but a lot of examples you gave were inaccurate. Honestly, if I wanted to find piles of research against your claims, all I would have had to do was look in the comments section of your own video, and I'm not trying to beat you up over it. We all have that one video we mess up on. We all get a mulligan, and I do wish you the best on your channel. I don't want to send any hate your way, though I'm sure that's inevitable. I really hope that doesn't come off arrogant of me, but I guess I could say it's less about arrogance and more about knowing better. Okay, so now, let me know when.
I can't adjust the... There we go.
Alright, go for it again.
When it's recording, I can't adjust the focus.
Oh, that's okay. Alright.
Oh, that's, yeah. Alright. Ugh. Instantly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Alright. I think that's all we need.
Okay.